Okay, we are live streaming. We're going to go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the third meeting of the Government Transition Advisory Committee's Voter and Candidate Education and Outreach Subcommittee. Today is Tuesday, January 9th, and we will be here from 11:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. My name is Julia Meyer. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Engagement and Community Participation Manager for the transition. Our co-chairs, Bill and Leah, will facilitate tonight's meeting. Next slide, please. Before we get started, I'm just going to take a moment to go over some meeting logistics. This meeting is being live streamed. A recording of the meeting will be posted on the city's transition webpage after the meeting ends under past meetings and events. For today's meeting, we have closed captioning available. To access closed captioning, click on the CC button on the bottom of your screen. For committee members, please take this moment to change your chat settings to everyone so that folks listening in today can follow along. And please do remember that the chat is part of the public meeting record. For community members listening in, we have the Q&A function available on Zoom. It's at the bottom of the screen, and you can submit questions or comments through there. We may not always answer them live during the meeting, but they also become part of the public meeting record. At today's meeting, we're not going to take verbal public comment, but as a reminder, you can submit public comment at any time on the transition website by emailing us at transition@portlandoregon.gov or by calling 311. And if you really want, which we love, to give verbal public comment, you can do it at the full GTAC meetings. The next opportunity for that is actually tomorrow night, Wednesday, January 10th. At 6 p.m. So I'm now going to turn it over to Bill to review today's agenda. We can go to the next slide. Bill, you're muted.
Thank you, Julia. Here is our meeting agenda, and it includes subcommittee business, staff updates, public feedback about ranked choice voting, as well as voter education plan feedback, educational materials review, and then at the end, we'll address next steps and have a review of what we will do at our next meeting. Our next slide, please, Julia or June. And we are looking forward to a full attendance today. So we'll probably still have a couple individuals join us. And we do have an announcement. And Leah, you have some, what I'll call good news.
I do. Thanks, Bill. Bittersweet news, I'll say, because today is both my first and last meeting as the co-chair of this subcommittee, because starting next week, I've accepted the position of ranked choice voting project manager with the county, which is wonderful and exciting. But after talking it through with Julia and a few other folks, we decided that there might be some confusion between my roles as a GTAC member and as an elections employee, specifically within this subcommittee. So while I'm going to continue on the general GTAC committee, we don't think it makes sense for me to continue as a part of this, although I'll be here as a resource and continue to be involved for sure. So thank you for your vote last week to be co-chair, but I'm going to give that up as of today. And I wanted to put that out there. That means that a co-chair seat is opening up. And I would love to have any of you volunteer to fill it. If you have any questions at all, feel free to reach out to me. And if you have interest, please reach out to me, Julia, and Bill. We'd be happy to get you all of the information and chat more. It's a really good opportunity, and I'd love to share more. If you have any questions about this new role or anything related to this, feel free to email me. Happy to chat more, but I don't want to take up any more of our subcommittee time. Thanks, Bill.
Well, thank you, Leah. And I'll say Bill welcomes the co-chair. So look forward to working with everyone. And I think our next order of business is to approve the meeting summary of our last meeting on November 29. So if individuals had a chance to look at that, and if there are any proposed edits, we welcome hearing them now. And absent edits, I'd welcome a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Okay, and was that
Fred.
Was that you that said that, Fred, or was that
Fred? Yes.
Yeah, okay, good. Yeah, very good, Fred. Excellent. And do we have a second?
This is Zach. I'll second.
Thank you, Zach. All right. Well, all those in favor, I guess we can raise our hand. So we can do it figuratively in our reactions. I'll do it. I don't know if I can vote if I'm moderating, but I did a thumbs up. So I think we have a passed motion. So thank you. Now we can move to the next slide, please. And allow me to review our working agreements about expectations for our committee. And that is, in discussions, we challenge ideas rather than individuals and offer constructive suggestions. We approach different opinions with curiosity and seek to understand. We keep the needs and concerns of the local community and the larger region at the forefront of our work, and arrive in time. So thank you, everyone, and prepare to the best of our ability beforehand. And of course, let us know if you're unable to attend a meeting. Fifth, we'll keep multitasking to a minimum. And last but not least, keep focus on the objectives of the meetings. And we'll, we as Leah and I, or my future colleague, will note additional topics for discussion. But if you can send them to us via email, we welcome them. Okay, next slide. More working agreement expectations. 7, we honor the decisions of the group. We also contribute to the overall success of the group by finding ways to participate that best meet all our needs. We also endeavor to step back and collectively work to ensure that every member who wants to be heard is heard. We also embrace conflict and work with our fellow members to find ways to give each other constructive feedback. And we'll aim to use, feedback tools. And also, if we use I statements, that helps to express our feelings and attitudes. So thank you. Next slide. And now we have opportunity for staff updates. So James Eccles from the City Elections Office, and Sophia Alvarez Castro from the transition team will share updates. So allow me to transfer this to James and Sophia.
Thank you, Bill. Sophia, I'll go first. It's just real quick, our update from the elections office. As some of you may know, we had the first candidate listening learning session last night. So it was our first event and endeavor into using candidate training as a tool for voter education. We had between 40 and 50 people attendees show up. It was a very engaged audience. We felt it was a very successful event. And on tomorrow night, we have the virtual session. We're going to record that session. I know that you all have a meeting, a large GTAC meeting during that session, but we're going to record that session. It'll be up on our website on Friday. So it'll be on the portland.gov/vote 2024 site, which is now live and will continue to be updated, but has all of our resources. Will be home to our resources for election voter education material. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer that. But my understanding is we'll talk more about it at the next voter education subcommittee, since you all will get a chance to view the recording between now and then. And then we very much want your feedback. There's a survey we've created that are going to the attendees. Once you've all watched that, we'll sort of loop that in so you can participate in the survey as well, because we'd love your feedback. Thanks.
James, I see a question in chat about how many people have registered for the virtual session. Do you know?
I haven't looked this morning. As of yesterday, it was about 65 or so. So not all of those people will show up. And then we've also gotten some people that were unable to make it yesterday that are reaching out today asking if they could shift to that session. So we'll add some people to the registration. You know, there's always last minute registrants, but as of last night, it was about 65 or so.
And thank you for recording it, because I know personally I had conflicts, so I look forward to watching the recording. Thank you.
The recording will be better anyway. We worked out the kinks last night, so you didn't have to watch us figure out how to do this for the first time. You'll get to watch the more refined, better approach. So you'll see that on Thursday.
Oh, I want to see the
Friday.
unedited. I want to see the unedited approach. Thank you, James. Sophia, do you have an update for us?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I think it'd be really helpful once you all watch the recording to hear your thoughts. I think it'll be really helpful for our planning and the sessions we'll have later on this year. So sorry for having to make you watch another recording, but we're really looking forward for your feedback. Yes, for updates, I wanted to provide some updates on a lot of the kind of deliverables and activities that we had talked about our last meeting. So I know later in the agenda, we're going to talk about the FAQ and the website. So I really won't touch on those because we'll talk about it later. But we've listed out a few things that we definitely want to begin talking about and start planning with you in this quarter. So some of those things, right, include the candidate learning sessions for later in the spring. But we really want to start also talking about our RCV platform. That's already in development, as we shared last time, but we want to talk about and plan with you how we're going to do outreach for that platform and how to give community partners that subscription/license that we got for community partners to then access the full platform. So collaborate on how we want to strategize around that. We also want to begin our social media planning and social media toolkits. So hear what you might find helpful based on your conversations, what you've seen. So anything kind of related to social media /toolkits. We also want to start planning our paid media planning strategy. So as you remember, we've allocated about, I think, $48,000 for paid media. So want to strategize with you, for example, what media outlets we should work with, what you might find helpful. Some folks have thrown us ideas around bus wraps, billboard ads. So just kind of planning around that, because the ad development for that does take quite a bit of time. So I want to make sure we're on top of that. Also want to talk about our mailer. We had planned originally for the mailer to go out in the fall, but just the development of the mailer takes a while. Coordinating mail routes, all that jazz takes quite a bit of time. So that's something we want to start. Maybe not right away, but maybe in one of the next couple of meetings talking about that. So if you have specific ideas, we'd love to hear about that. Same with the ballot insert that will go in the actual ballot. So that's something that we need to start thinking about. And then kind of lastly is our town hall planning and summer tabling. So we had planned to do some summer tabling over the summer. So figure out what events might be helpful or you all might be interested in. And then just some town hall planning that we'll do in the fall. And then some other quick little updates. For the comic, the contractor began to work on a revised script and scope for the comic. And so we'll get a draft of that by most likely mid-February. We'll try to make it by our next meeting, but in case we don't, we'll send that via email so you all can review it and provide edits, feedback on that. So this is the revised educational comic. And then as well, we're working with the county on their video on ranked choice voting. So we're starting that process of setting up, and they're starting that process of starting up an RFP for contractors to solicit essentially bids to do that video. And so we'll begin developing that script with the county closely and begin that process.
Thank you, Sophia. We look forward to working with you, and later in our meeting, we have a slide with regard to voter feedback. But that'll be one of the subjects that Leah will cover. So Leah, I'll pass the mic on to you to address some of the following topics. So please, Leah.
Thank you, Bill. Based on the committee work plan that we put together, a role of this subcommittee is to report feedback from the public about ranked choice voting. So we need to hold time at each subcommittee meeting for members to share what they're hearing from the community. This should come from engagements that you've done in community, reading public comment reports, etc. And so this is our first time doing it. And so what I want to do is open it up for everyone to share the feedback that they've been hearing from the public. So I'm going to leave a moment just for people to raise your hands if you have something you'd like to share. While people are hopefully collecting their thoughts to share, I'll share a couple of mine. From the past month, I had 2 different engagements. And the number one thing people wanted to talk about at both was ranked choice voting, specifically wanting to get into the particulars of how it worked. And there were no specific questions people had, more just really excited to get some education about it. I had a follow-up from 2 different groups I spoke with over the last quarter in the past week asking about GTAC voter education things. So people are ready. With that, Fred, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Oh, thanks, Leah, and congratulations again. That's great that you're going to help us at that end as well. But I had an engagement with New Year's Eve from a labor representative that concerned about the possibility with a unique ballot being sent out for the first time for everyone that there could be up to a 14% spoilage rate. And I don't know I didn't look at the county stats for historic ballots, but how many people mess up their ballot. At least with that, if it's the return envelope, like they get a chance to remedy their mistake. I don't think that would work with a ranked choice ballot because the ballot's already been opened. And so then you've got to throw it out if it's overvoted. And so it just reminded me again how imperative is that all Portland voters understand that what this ballot's going to look like and how to effectively and securely vote it.
Thank you very much, Fred. Zach.
Mine is just more of a personal insight and comment of various conversations that I've had with people over the last month or so. I can't emphasize and reiterate enough the importance of practice with people who you are comfortable with and can kind of screw up and they can ask you back questions because I've had several, I wouldn't say confrontational conversations, but those where there's just dissent about how ranked choice voting will work and that kind of thing, and being able to articulate it clearly and concisely is really important. And I'm excited about the possibility of having the mailer. It comes to me as maybe an idea that we can have that as an accompaniment as well to our outreach when we're out in the community, as something that can be, we can test the effectiveness of that material, but also it's much more of a direct experience, and sharing that in those instances might be useful. Thanks.
Thank you, Zach. Juanita, I'm going to pass it to you. Juanita, you're muted.
A conversation with Vandana Chesna, who is the state director for AARP in Oregon. And I talked to her into the person who is in charge within the structure to work and maintain informed the community 50 years and over in Portland about the change in governance in Portland. Their main concern is the ranking choice. They feel that it's going to be very confusing for people. They're afraid that people are not going to be able to vote as effectively as they usually do because of the changes on the process. And so they really want to get involved more with this, with what's going on. I will be sending June and Julia the phone number and the name of the contact person within AARP, because they would really like to coordinate more their ability to provide information to their audience, to the people that they work with. And so, but that's the main concern that I hear, ranking choice voting. The other thing, this is just my comment on reviewing the information that has been posted in terms of questions most asked. And that includes some information about the ranking choice voting. And I think it would be very helpful to have, besides just the written explanation, to have some visual examples. Is really important, especially for people, that are elderly, or, or people who don't read very well English. Some that is visual and explain the example, what will happen when you do this. So it will be very clear. So that's my contribution.
Thank you very much. We do just have a couple minutes left and have a pretty packed agenda. So Bill and Jane, I'm going to invite you both to speak, but quite quickly. And if you can't, feel free to share it in chat. Bill, go ahead.
I will share in chat. Go
Great.
ahead.
Thank you so much. Yeah, Jane. Jane, you're still muted. Thank you.
Apologize for that. I had some success in asking people what they're excited about ranked choice voting, and I discovered that people who've experienced it before speak up. So when I was at Mount Tabor, a guy who had lived in Alaska for most of his life had done that. And also many people said, well, we do ranked choice voting all the time. We often get to ask to pick our top 5 of something online. So people are used to choosing. It's just not necessarily in the voting process.
That's helpful, Jane. Thank you. Juanita, I still see your hand up. Did you have another comment, or is that from before?
Sorry about that. I will take
No,
it
it's
up.
fine. I just didn't want to skip over you.
Thank you.
Okay. Oh, also, we're ahead of schedule. You guys, I'm sorry about that. We actually have 10 more minutes for comment. Sorry, I got ahead of us there. We're just too fast. So, Bill, if you do want to say live and in the meeting your comment that you wanted to share, we have time for that. But,
Okay. Why?
Yeah.
I hope I don't have stage fright. But no, what I was going to ask, it might be a question for Sophia, perhaps in an email to us, or now if it's on the top of your head, could you remind or tell us where we can get the current information on ranked choice voting? I think at a prior session, say there was reference to, there'll be a model where individuals can practice actually doing ranked choice voting. I just want to be sure we all know where to go, where to see or use the helpful materials.
Yeah, that's a great question, Bill. So James beat me to it, but it's the new website that we created. It's portland.gov/vote 2020.
Great.
But yes, that's where we'll put, so as I'd referenced earlier, the RCV platform that we'll have where you can kind of play and do a election. That's where it'll live. And then that's where in the future we hope to put the information about if any community partner wants like a licensed version of this so that they can run it their own, right? Like if, I think that's the example we always use, if the Portland Timbers, right, want access to this platform to do it on their own and run a like mock election, we would have all that information on our website. And that's one of the things we want to talk to you all about is like, how do we structure this program?
Excellent. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Bill. Does anyone else have any last thoughts that they want to share about public feedback regarding ranked choice voting? Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, one of the things that I have a concern as I was looking into the plan and all of the information being posted online is that there is a very large portion of the community who don't have access to computers. So as I was looking into all of the information, yeah, it's great for people who have access to internet and computers, but there's a large population. So I think that we need to look more into what is the strategy to reach those people who don't have access to online information.
Thank you. And are there any other comments people would like to raise regarding public feedback right now? No? As a reminder, this is going to be a standing agenda item. At each subcommittee meeting, there will be space for this. So consider that as you are having conversations in the community and making presentations, jot any notes and make sure that we're bringing them to these meetings. And with that, I'm going to move on to our next agenda item. So next slide, please. Okay. Last week, we distributed the revised voter education plan. Before we discuss the voter education plan, though, we want to talk about the contract portion of the city's plan. We want to take any final, excuse me, I'm like jumping around in all of my words here. Before we discuss the voter education contract portion of the city's plan, we want to take any final proposed revisions or questions about the city's voter education plan. So before we talk about the contract, we want to talk about the city's voter education plan. Are there any more thoughts or questions about that plan before I turn it over to Sophia and James to talk a little bit more about the contract? Fred.
Yes, I think I noticed that because Brink Communications has gone away, right, or dissolved, that was it Rose King she was with Brink and she's with Heart and Mind Communications, and that the contract is now with that firm. Was that right? Sophia?
Yes, so that's something we wanted to talk about. I can start right away on that, or should we?
Yeah.
What are you gonna do, Leah? Do you want to collect all the?
I just want to make sure. So
Question.
again, we're going to go right into talking about the contract after
Okay.
this.
Oh, I thought
Questions will be answered.
I didn't
Before
know
we
what
do
you were
that,
asking for, Leah.
no, it's totally fine. I confused it by like messing up the wording there. This is specifically if people have questions outside of the contract, anything regarding the voter education plan. And it sounds like no at this time. So I'm going to invite Sophia and James to share information about the voter education contract. We are also joined today by Linda Law, Chief Deputy City Attorney. And so I'm going to turn it over to Sophia first. Thank you, Sophia.
Thanks. Yeah, Leah's right there. She's waving. Leah, thanks for making time on your lunch to be here with us today. She can help answer additional questions that may pop up about the contract. So I think what we wanted to do with James and I is just I know we've received a lot of different questions, some via email, some through the actual plan. So we thought we would just kind of go over some of the main questions that we've received. And then, of course, open it up to kind of Q&A and discussion. And then, as I shared, Linda can answer any other additional questions as well about the contract. Okay, so of course, one of the first questions that we got was around the voter education contract, the process, and the partners. So as we've all heard, right, the city is implementing this three-pronged approach to voter education. One is the broad voter education using our existing channels. The second one is our robust candidate training. And then the third one, which we're talking about now, is the subgranting funds to community partners to reach voters the city has a hard time reaching. So the transition team, in collaboration with the Elections Office, Multnomah County, drafted a request for proposals. That RFP was reviewed by the city attorney, and then it was released for an open and competitive process through the city's procurement process. The contract went through the traditional procurement process, competitive process, and in July of this last summer, the contract was awarded to United Way of Columbia Willamette, the 501c3, for a collaborative project with Democracy Rising, Portland United for Change, a fiscally sponsored project of United Way, which I'll talk to a little bit more in a little bit, and then Brink Communications. Shortly after the city signed that contract, Brink Communications ceased operations. So immediately, the contractor began looking for a replacement firm that could take all of Brink's scope of work. So through that process, we had to go through procurement. Hearts and Mind Communications was selected, and then we began a contract amendment in, it was about August of last summer. And then just a couple of days ago, we received the actual final contract. So in January of 2024, the contract was finally amended and signed, and you all should have a copy of that contract in your GTAC folders. Essentially, it was just swapping Brink for Hearts and Mind and their entire scope going to them. So of the partners that we have United Way of Columbia Willamette. They have served as the fiscal agent and backbone for the Census Equity Funders Committee of Oregon and affiliated Oregon Census Equity Fund. The Oregon Census Equity Fund was a private public pool funds of almost $10 million that supported the Hard to Count campaign, the We Count Oregon. The We Count Oregon campaign designated a multi-pronged strategy in partnership with existing community-based organizations and community ambassadors, something similar kind of what we're doing now. Democracy Rising, they're a fiscal sponsored project of the NEO Philanthropy, a 501c3. They're the national expert on ranked choice voting and have worked on voter education across the nation, including 23 different cities in the state of Utah and 4 different states where the Democratic Party used ranked choice voting for the 2020 presidential primaries. Then the last 2 partners are Hearts and Mind Communications. They're a collective of communicators, designers, creatives, and account strategists are dedicated to really working on the pressing issues in their communities. Their project team brings really a wealth of lived and professional experience, including account strategy, creative leads, and then really have a history of supporting culturally resonant multilingual campaigns for government and nonprofit agencies. As Fred, you mentioned, there are some previous Brink staff that currently work there at Hearts and Mind Communication. I just want to highlight that. And then lastly is Portland United for Change. So Portland United for Change is a project that grew out of the campaign measure 26-228 and is a fiscally sponsored project of the United Way of Columbia Willamette. Samantha Gladu was hired as the coalition director on a temporary basis. And Samantha did not work on the campaign, and she has a background in multi-structure nonprofit leadership, organizing, and voter education. Any money that's raised or paid to Portland United for Change goes to United Way of Columbia Willamette, and Samantha's checks are directly from United Way. So in this case, United Way is the legal party and has oversight of and administers any contracts, service agreements, grant awards, and any payments from or to Portland United for Change. So Portland United for Change is operating on a 501c3 basis and is not recruiting or championing any candidates or otherwise campaigning/electioneering. And additionally, Samantha as an individual, is not recruiting or supporting any city candidates in her personal capacity or personal time. Okay. The second question that we received was around kind of who the contract work will be done on behalf of. So we just wanted to ensure that all the direct voter education activities and outreach will only be conducted by and on behalf of the community partners that will receive the future subgrants. So Portland United for Change, Hearts and Mind Communications, or Democracy Rising will not be involved in any direct voter education outreach or activities. So as outlined in our contract, Hearts and Mind will be the lead on media and material development. Democracy Rising is the lead on partner trainings on ranked choice voting, kind of RCV experts. And then Portland United for Change will coordinate all contract activities and is our main contract lead. And then lastly, just want to highlight that all the materials that come out of this contract will be reviewed and are approved by the transition team, the city elections office, and Multnomah County. We regularly have begun to meet and to plan for and coordinate for these contract activities. And that's outlined in the contract as well. And then ultimately, the city project manager will have final approval on the materials. So for example, the scripts that they will use for direct voter outreach will be reviewed and approved by the transition elections office and county, and then be finally approved by the city project manager. One of the other questions that we got was around what is the communication plan for just general contract activities. And so we've initially shared a little bit about the contract activities in our transition team newsletter and website in October of this last year. And we plan to continue to do that, share our future contract activities and the subgrant opportunities widely through the transition newsletter, a website, and of course now our new website for voter education. We also hope to use you all as a resource so you can share the information with your networks, but we also plan tapping into our partners at the city, such as Friends of Civic Life, PBOT, Bureau offices, and council offices, of course, so that they can share this opportunity widely with their networks. And we hope, again, that we can have their new website as the repository for all voter education. So we're really just directing folks to the website, and that's the place where folks can really find everything and all future voter education stuff. I know I said a lot, but James has a few other things I think he's going to add before we kind of open it, I think, to a formal Q&A and additional questions.
Thank you, Sophia. So I want to briefly cover, hopefully briefly cover sort of how normal this is. I know there are some concerns that were voiced about, this is something the city is doing for the first time. Is this normal, or is this unusual or unique? So I just want to cover some of that topic. The first thing to talk about is that although the city is doing this exact thing for the first time ever, we're also doing voter education for the first time ever. It's never been a mandate in the charter before. So we've never really, this has just not come across the city's plate because it's not something that we have had a mandate to do or had any active role in. If you go outside of the city, though, to jurisdictions that have done this in the past, it absolutely is a normal occurrence. Let me be clear that the occurrences that is normal is grants and subgrants going to organizations that have both the C3 and C4, and then having those C3s do nonpartisan democracy building activities or get out the vote type capacities is a very normal occurrence in a great number of jurisdictions that do regular voter education. Specifically, just to kind of prepare to give you all a scope of the world and the jurisdictions, we spoke specifically to Seattle elections, to King County, to Minneapolis, to New York City, and to Arizona. Most of these places are places that are doing ranked choice voting and have done it in recent years. So that's why we wanted to talk to them specifically. After talking to all of those jurisdictions, none of them have ever had a legal concern where a contract had to be pulled. They all talked about that at some point they did offer grants or some sort of funding where city money would end up in the hands of an organization that would do this type of work. They did get people that would sometimes, there are occasions, in New York City where there would be a media story about a concern with an organization that might be viewed in the public to be more or less political. But those were answered well with covering the guardrails and legal issues, which I will leave to Linda to talk about the legal side. But it is something that has come up, but it has never been as a concern, but it has not been something where they've legally pulled the contract in these jurisdictions we've talked to. They did have some recommendations for us. Some of these things we're already doing and are in place. And some of these things, I think, as we move forward would be a great idea. One is simply the idea that if you do have an issue, that you would pull the contract and you would make it so that it's no longer can that organization receive money. That's already in our contract. Essentially, the contract already talks about the C3, C4 separation. So if that happens, we already have the ability to pull the money as a violation of that contract. Something else we have in our contract that there's going to be trainings for anybody, these subgrantees. That's in writing already in the contract. These jurisdictions recommended documenting that training and making sure to kind of keep good records so that if it ever did go to that, I think that's also a great idea. Some of these jurisdictions have sort of what they communally referred to as a city liaison that would work where their specific role, and this is something we could probably just have like Sophia or someone doing more of, but their specific role is sort of additional training and follow-up with the organizations that get that money, and also making sure that there's a diverse applicant pool. And I mean diverse in the way that we understand there may be concerns of the appearance of one side of the political spectrum getting a lot of these contracts over time. So this is a city liaison that would sort of make sure to have that in their scope and keep it in mind. So that's certainly something that as we look to set our guidance for the committee that will review these proposals for the subgrants, we can talk about how they may have that as a factor in the review process. The last thing I want to say about the jurisdictions is we do have the ability, we couldn't for this meeting because it's pretty short notice, but if there are future concerns, we also do have an opportunity to bring representatives directly from those jurisdictions that have implemented this work as election administrators, and they could come to a future voter education subcommittee and talk to you and answer your questions directly if there continues to be concerns. The next thing I want to talk about is that I think there was some confusion about the get out the vote part of the plan and kind of what is meant by get out the vote. I do think that it can sometimes be a vague term, but in the election world, especially in the campaign finance world, it has a very specific meaning. So a get out the vote campaign is by rule a nonpartisan activity where you are simply encouraging voters to participate in the action. This is something that is in state law. You can go to the Secretary of State's campaign finance manual, and you can find that they have, which the campaign finance manual in Oregon is an administrative rule. You can find wording that allows any campaign to do this action and report it as a nonpartisan activity as long as they're doing so. These are things that have been happening for a long time in Oregon and other places where campaigns get this money and they go out and they do a nonpartisan action like encouraging voters to vote in a broad spectrum. And as long as they're doing that in a nonpartisan way, they can report that as a nonpartisan activity. So it's not something that's necessarily new to this plan or this voter education plan. An analogy sort of that is not perfect, but that is happening in Portland right now. Small donor elections actually does create a system where city money can end up in the hands of a campaign and allows them to use that money to pay for nonpartisan events. It's not a perfect analogy because they're also using kind of city funding to do other things, but SDE has what they call a democracy building activity, and they put that under their category of sort of nonpartisan activity, where if it's something like get out the vote or like doing a debate forum with all of the candidates involved, as long as it's something that is nonpartisan and generally helps to build democracy, then they include that under that category. So it's not a perfect analogy, like I said, but it is something that's already happening that we can kind of look to kind of learn issues they've had and hope to avoid that. And then the last thing I'll say is just that I know there may be visual concerns, but there are guardrails in place for this sort of in the contract, in state law, in city law already. So it's something that we are certainly aware of, and we certainly would keep an eye out for. But it's not new in the world of elections to sort of do this work in this way. One last thing that I will mention is also for Portland United for Change. It is unusual for Samantha specifically as sort of the running this contract on that side to agree to not do any campaign work outside of that. It's not something that is required. Even I, as an election worker, could clock out at 5 and go campaign for a candidate on my own personal time. So I think I just want to draw attention to that because I think the contractor is trying to see these concerns, acknowledge these concerns, and do something extra to sort of avoid the appearance of any kind of issue there. And I think we also want to do that because we know that there are visual concerns. We want to do whatever we can to avoid them. I don't think that there are sort of there are legal structural concerns, but I think those are things that are answered already in the system and things that we can sort of put in place guardrails that aren't, if they aren't there already. So hopefully that helps kind of give a sense of the election world and the work that's being done. I'm happy to answer any further on that or go deeper into that or answer any other questions on that issue.
Thank you all. Sophia and James, before I open it up to people for questions, is there anything else that either of you or that Linda wants to add?
No, I will answer. I can't answer Amy's question in chat. So Portland United for Change does have a PAC. There is a couple of things about that. One, Portland United for Change as Samantha under United Way is a program. United Way is not giving money to the PAC. The PAC has its own account. The money is going to Samantha, and then United to pay her obviously her salary, and then United Way uses that money, and Samantha will direct kind of where it goes in ways. So the PAC, the account for the PAC, is not receiving any money directly from the city or even indirectly through somebody. The other thing I do want to mention about the PAC, although there is a Portland United for Change PAC, there has been some confusion about another organization that has a similar name, the Portland United or something like that, that Samantha had some concerns about, that may have gotten a campaign finance violation. That's never happened. The Portland United for Change PAC has not received a campaign finance violation. That is not, they don't exist under that world. And when you create a PAC in Oregon or any sort of political committee, you have to register that in ORSTAR with the state of Oregon. Currently, and since the 2022 election, Portland United for Change's PAC is registered solely for the purpose of the measure for ranked choice voting in the city of Portland and for the 2022 general election. They cannot, by law, spend any money or raise any money for the purposes of anything other than that election. And since they have not changed that, they have had no activity to raise money or to spend money with the purpose of influencing anything other than that 2022 general election. If they wanted to change that purpose, they would have to go in and submit a new statement of organization. So although the PAC exists, it exists for the purpose of an election, a year and a half ago. It has not been used since then, and it can't legally be used for anything else until they make a structural change to it.
Great. Thank you very much, James. Thank you to both James and Sophia for all of that information. A number of members sent questions over in advance, and I appreciate the two of you taking the time to answer all of them. I do anticipate that people are going to have several questions now, and I ask that everyone please raise your hand if you have a question now. And what I'm going to do is ask James, Sophia, and Linda to not answer the questions as they come, but instead I'm going to have everyone ask their question and then have the three of you respond once everyone has asked all of them, instead of having question, answer. Sound good? Okay, great. Then Amy, I'm going to start with you. Again, just state your question, and then we'll wait until everyone has gone through for answers. Thank you.
Great. And for clarification, is this time okay to share also just a general feedback on what we've just learned, not just questions? Because I think this would be a good time to just, for the record, give a little bit of overall feedback as well.
That's a great clarification. Yes, please.
Okay. Well, first, thank you so much for the additional information. Some cases and some parts of it, I am starting, it's definitely giving me a little bit more of an understanding of why this arrangement has been put together. But I will say overall, my biggest takeaway and concern remains that just because something is legal, it doesn't necessarily make it wise. And if the number of questions that GTAC members have had about this arrangement is any indication about how the public may perceive it, that should still be a concern for GTAC. GTAC has a role of making sure that we ensure a smooth transition and that we ensure a sense of confidence and transparency with voters. And we are having lengthy, long-form conversations about something that we will not have that much time to explain and put at ease the minds of the average voter. So that's my biggest concern from all of this, is just because it's legal, I'm not entirely sure this has been thought through with the end in mind of when we get into that really busy election season and we have now maybe 90 candidates into the mix, and there are some that may be claiming make claims of favoritism. For example, the political alliances of Portland United for Change and their team. I know they're no longer active, it sounds like, as a PAC. but they are embedded with different entities politically. They have a certain network that they are with. Then we have a coalition of partners that we are going to be providing grants to. Many of those partners, more than likely, will be politically active in some way, shape, or form. And so now we're providing tax dollars to these entities. And I can only imagine a candidate down the road saying, wait a minute, this education about how to fill out your ballot is being conducted by people who have been very visibly active in our political scene and are very visibly aligned with current candidates running against me. So I'll stop there. I just can see the end in mind, maybe that even with good interests in the best of interest in mind, we might still be running into perceived conflict of interest that could be a problem.
Thank you for that. I want to make sure that everyone has a chance to speak, and we do have a limited amount of time. So please share everything that you came here to, but try to keep it as concise as you can, just so we can get through everyone and have time for responses too. With that, Terry, thank you.
Thanks, James and Sophia, for the explanations and answering some of the questions. I am still concerned about the Get Out the Vote GOTV stuff. In that, let me just outline my thinking. And I've talked to a few people about this. When you look up the 501c3 guidance at the IRS, they have very specific words that says voter education or registration activities with evidence of bias that A, would favor one candidate or over another, oppose a candidate in some manner, or have the effect of favoring a candidate or group of candidates would constitute prohibited participation in the convention. Okay, so that's the 501c3 standard, and that's what everyone is deciding is legal for GOTV. And I'm just not convinced that the constellation of subcontractors that we're going to get under this contract and do direct voter contact GOTV work without violating the guidance, especially if those subcontractor organizations have C4s or PACs that are affiliated with them. And those exist in Portland, and I suspect that they will be in that constellation of subcontractors. Even if the work is independent, even if the funding is segregated, GOTV efforts are targeted by their very nature. And those targeting efforts are going to be evidence of bias that have the effect of favoring candidates or groups of candidates. Because there are going to be so many candidates and so many political actors out there that I don't know how, unless your targeting is completely unbiased and essentially random. So I don't think you can meet the legal standards. But the real concern that I have, because I've done 501c3 targeted get out the vote efforts for organizations with the built-in bias, but it's been privately funded. At the core, I just don't think the city's accountability to being particularly sensitive to the appearances of bias in a city election context. I think that's it just doesn't work. So I'm at the point where I need to make a motion, and the motion is going to be that the voter education subcommittee recommends that GTAC draft a letter to the transition team, mayor and council, recommending amendment to the voter education plan to eliminate the direct voter contact GOTV portion of the plan, instead redirect those resources to the educational efforts that are earlier and or more broadcast in nature. So that's my motion, and I just think I need to be on the record for that. I talk to people who have the same concerns, and they're very specific, and I tried to narrow it to these specific concerns. So I'll drop the language in the chat and leave it at that.
I do want to say, since we've had a motion made, if people would like to discuss that now, we would need a second.
I second the motion.
Okay, thank you, Juanita. Okay. So Fred, Destiny, and Zach, I will get to you in your general comments about this, but at this point, I would like to have discussion specifically about the motion that Terry made.
You want to raise hand? Raise hand.
And with raised hand, Zach, I'm sorry, I've got some shifting on my screen. Destiny, I've got you up next.
Thank you. Thank you, Terry, for putting up that motion. I think this is a great place to have that conversation. I did let it be known in my response to Terry that I do not support getting rid of the direct get out the vote voter interactions. I did find out, thanks to James, that Portland United for Change will not be actually conducting the direct voter interaction. So that I think is very clear and forward. I will say that if the audience, and this is going back to the original contract, the audience specifically says Black, Latino, Indigenous, refugees, immigrants. So there is already a preferred audience in this contract. It's not general voter education, which I have said I support our GTAC wanting more funding for that, wanting more resources for it. But this contract is very focused on scope. And if we're talking about getting out the vote for Black, Indigenous, immigrant, refugees, homeless, disabled, low education folks, that specifically during the time when news and communications is going to be very hyper aware of the elections, I think it's very critical to actually have that scope of work there so that we engage the most Portlanders that we can, that is written within the scope and is aligned to that scope. If people hear it in the news, this is going to be a great time for them to have other organizations inform people how to vote, and especially the hard to reach voters. Whenever we can get a chance to connect with them, it is vital to actually increase engagement in their democracy. And one of the things that was in the contract is that while they are doing RFPs for organizations to be paid to do this work, the coalition also will welcome any organization that would like to be trained and sign the paperwork to do it unpaid. And so it will maintain nonpartisan, and it's open to that. That is within the contract as well. And so specifically on the motion, I don't support getting rid of direct voter contact because Portland United for Change won't be doing that. It will be multiple organizations within a coalition. And I did agree, we need transparency on who those partners are. And so I think this, James, Sophia, and Samantha have been great in providing this information. And I think we should keep requesting this information for full transparency and accountability.
Thank you, Destiny. Fred.
Thank you, Leah. I support the motion. I find that, first of all, the Portland United for Change is not a 501c4, so the safety valve in the contract about being able to revoke the contract based on some improprieties does not apply to a limited liability corporation, which is a company which is actually can be a for-profit company. I don't know. And that's not something they can change overnight, such as they can change their PAC status. I've wrote the original campaign finance manual, James, and I just looked through it now, and I don't see where there is a definition of get out the vote per se. Electioneering is out there and voter education. If I went to Wikipedia last week and found that whoever the experts are there, and there's a caveat, if there ever was one, that there are actually two different definitions for get out the vote. One is that nonpartisan outreach, which is fabulous and so important and something that any elections official does, anyone that any citizen should be doing with their fellow citizens. And it's vital to this voter education effort that we're undertaking now. But the second one is that more traditional one that is some of us old campaigners and Pauls, such as Terry or myself, recognize as targeted get out the vote. And that means getting your union members, your fellow Republicans, your neighborhood association members to vote for a specific issue or candidate. And of course, Portland Unite for Change, as I said in my notes, can change their, they can target the council races today. All they have to do is file an amendment to their statement of organization with the Secretary of State. It is that second definition, that more traditional and less benign get out the vote definition that concerns me as well. And I especially since like there's in the work plan, there is a like for Q4 of the 2024 of this year, the finalized election day plans. That voter registration deadline is October 15th. The ballots are mailed on the 16th. That's the critical time when I think it's imperative that there not be direct voter contact with these subgroups, which we still don't know. There was a survey that was to be done this last quarter to identify the communities historically left out of the decision-making process in the city. And I haven't seen the results of that. Are there any? Because these are the potential partners, I guess, identified with those communities that would get the subgrant RFP sent out this quarter in the next 2 months. And so I am concerned that we don't know who they are. Destiny, maybe you've got some inside information on that, but I don't, and I know the people that have raised these concerns with me don't either.
Thank you, Fred. Great. So we have 3 more hands raised. As a reminder, we're having discussion on the motion, and after we have all of the comments made, we will take a vote. Zach, I'm going to call on you next.
Thanks, Leah. And I appreciate the concern and the articulation of that concern with this motion. And I personally think that I'm not in support of proceeding with the motion. I do think that there is a lot of speculation and elevated concern about targeted outreach and who does that mean is getting these devoted resources. But I must remind everybody that we are also committed as a committee to trying to do targeted outreach within our own community engagement and ensuring that we have better and more equitable understanding and information about what our election will look like and how it will be represented in our democracy. And so I don't support that. I think on a general statement, I think it's important that we show faith in the city legal team to what this contract means and some of the stipulations that exist around roles, responsibilities of the organizations that we have a contract for.
Thank you, Zach. Jose, I'm going to pass it to you.
Thank you. First, let me say that I do appreciate the thoughts and concern around this, but unfortunately, they're thoughts and concerns that I've personally heard 100 times before. Every organization that is run to get to do these efforts gets these kinds of criticism against them because one, people are involved in politics, and I've been involved with a lot of get out the vote organizations that are nonpartisan in like Georgia and a lot of different states, but they're run by people heavily involved in politics. This is what they do. So you can always point to something they've done in the past that shows that they favor one side or another. Or people will say, well, they're targeting this demographic, and this demographic tends to vote 7% this way, so they're actually not nonpartisan, but that demographic happens to be just a minority group, but they tend to vote one way. So there's always going to be these thoughts that they're not as impartial as we would like them to be. But we also can't ask people to go their whole lives without voting and without expressing concern on politics, and then all of a sudden jump into this fear and run get out the vote nonprofits. Those people will have been involved in politics for a long time, will have landed on different sides of it, and will have been very vocal about it. That's just the way it is. And to be honest, I think everyone should be very involved in politics. So there should be a way to look back on what everyone has done. So I personally do not support this motion. And unfortunately, being in a minority group that tends to vote, actually being part of numerous minority groups that tend to vote a certain way, any group that tries to reach out to my community gets labeled impartial because of a perceived conflict. Thank you.
Thank you, Jose. Bill, I'm going to pass it to you.
Oh, thank you, Leah. I'm attentive to, but ambivalent about this motion. For example, I'm unsure about where the redirection goes. I mean, the way it's written, and I respect Terry's construction of the language, but if it goes to educational efforts that are earlier broadcast in nature or more broadcast in nature, I'm unsure what the difference is going to be. Ultimately, I'm thinking we have time, do we not? And I'm thinking, I'll propose, just amending it or moving to table the motion until our next meeting in February, because maybe we can narrow or make the language more precise. I think we have time to try to get it what the issue is. So allow me to make that motion to table it until our next meeting, which will be in February.
Thank you, Bill. Terry, I'm going to allow you to respond to that.
Yeah, let me just do just a really quick answer to some of it. And I appreciate Bill's attempt to table here. I want to be sensitive to getting on with the voter education program and having a plan and working the plan, that sort of thing. So, I don't think we need to table it. I think the opinions here are sort of clear. And but I do want to clarify what I'm getting at is the last month of the election, the direct to voter contact. Okay, that's like the door-to-door work, the phone call work, the individual voter contacts in that last month of the election. I think you cannot avoid the appearances, the evidence of bias that favor a candidate or a group of candidates. There are going to be slates of candidates out there. It's just going to be tough to avoid. And the distinction between other organizations doing get out the vote in a nonpartisan way in that last month is that's privately funded. That comes down from foundations into organizations that are set up to do that work. But this is the city running a city election that now has subcontractors doing direct to voter work that's targeted not by the city. So that's the problem I have. It's just that month. It's just that type of contact. Everything else I think is fine and important work to do in a voter education program. That's all I wanted to clarify.
Thank you, Terry. I do want to be mindful of time and that we have 19 minutes left in the meeting, and I know that we all want to make sure that we're able to have some finality to this conversation. And I apologize, I skipped over something. Bill made an amendment, a motion to amend the original motion to table this discussion to discuss further at our next meeting. And I need to give the opportunity if anyone wants to second that. Okay, hearing none.
Fair.
Okay, hearing none, we'll move on. Fred, just time for one more quick comment if you have one. And then I'm going to give the city some time to respond to any questions, and then we will vote as a subcommittee.
Sure, I've been adding questions along the line. I think James and Samantha have been trying to respond. I agree with Terry that it is that last after voter registration, when the ballots are out. I don't see the purpose by that time, end of October, the last 20 days of the election period, that we've got to have informed people of what the ballot looks like and how they can successfully vote the ballot. Anything beyond that becomes partisan, becomes getting slates or particular populations to vote a particular way. I'd be a lot more comfortable if I knew that the review team, which is the county, the city, and I believe that's United Way. I'm not sure. Project manager. Thank you, Samantha. We'll be looking at the subcontractors' materials as well. I'd be much more comfortable if you agreed that it was partisan in nature, even though not per se advocating, if a candidate of any population, any candidate's picture, name, or policies were cited in any of the educational materials. Let's talk about the ballots and how the ballots are going to change and not deal with candidates at all in this education effort. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. I do want to note for folks who haven't been looking, there is a lot of action happening right now in the chat with questions being answered and people sharing perspectives there. As folks are thinking through with voting, it might be useful to review that. At this time, I am going to give city staff a chance to respond to any of the questions or comments that were raised. I ask that you just take 5 minutes to do so that we do have time to be able to vote on this. With that, James and Sophia, I'd like to hand it back to you to speak to anything.
Thanks. James, maybe I can just get started real quickly. We try to answer as much as possible in the chat. I think I do want to clarify a few things. And I think it's lastly to what Fred was speaking of, is any material that we create out of this contract is completely nonpartisan and is going to be approved and reviewed, as Fred mentioned, by the transition team, the elections office, the county, and of course the contractor is going to be involved in that process as they're really coordinating, right, the review process between between Hearts and Mind, the RCV contractor, ensuring. So all of it will be nonpartisan. So that's that. A follow-up question that I did have is I'm understanding that you all have specific concerns around towards the end of the election. So are you trying to imply that you're okay with, for example, a community partner who gets a subgrant to do voter education for them, for example, to do tabling events or summer town halls, like in the summer or in the early fall, around exactly what you're saying, Fred, how the ballot works, how ranked choice voting works, when this is going to get started, etc. Just to make sure I'm understanding that. Okay, I see something else. Okay.
You good, Sophia? Or
yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I guess first I'll try to cover as much as I can quickly. I know we're stressed on time. Fred, I would first say I 100% absolutely agree with you that if a piece of educational material cites a candidate directly or has an image of a candidate, it absolutely would be partisan, and it would also be absolutely and strictly not allowed by my office's actions, and it's something that we would not support this voter education plan doing, or any money or any material being created. But I also believe that the plan that we have in place will minimize what you're talking about, not add to it. because of the way that we've structured this plan, the city and the transition team are going to control the review. Every piece of material that the contractor produces has to be approved by us. It's part of our plan that it has to go through approval by us. The auditor's office would never approve a piece of educational material that has anything related to a specific candidate, a specific party, a specific issue outside of voting or not voting. So any of that would not get approved by this office. That means that any of this material that's getting produced and sent out there for individuals is not going to have that. If we don't provide the material, I guarantee you from years of experience working in elections, if we don't provide material to the people that are going out there, they will make their own material, they will have their own conversations, and they will do whatever. I can't promise that they won't do that anyway. It will happen. But this action, what generally happens is these organizations are happy to receive material that we produce. They see this well-produced fact sheet about how ranked choice voting works. They don't want to spend the time and the money to create their own fact sheet. They're going to use ours. Not everybody, but more people than otherwise. So this action will actually, I believe, reduce the amount of partisan get out the vote or direct voter contact that you have out there. I also think, I just want to put it on the record that I do think that having no direct voter contact would be a great loss for Portland voter education. My office, the transition team, we don't have the resources and capacity to perform direct voter contact. We barely have the capacity to create the plan and to manage a team that is doing that. Because of that, that's why we generated this plan that would create a structure where we oversee, we create the material, and we create a plan, and then we trickle it down to the partners so that they can go out. If we remove the ability of the partners to do that, we won't have direct voter contact happening by the city. It's something that simply we don't have a capacity to do at this time. Perhaps in future years, we'll restructure the funding or we'll change how things work. But at this time, we simply don't have the capacity to do it. So without this part of the contract, there won't be any sort of partisan or otherwise, there won't be any kind of contact that is happening. And I think that a number of you have had the experience where when you start to go out and you talk to individuals about how ranked choice voting works, they've already seen the sheet. They've already gone to the website. They've already watched a video. They have other questions. They need that nuanced back and forth and that conversation that they can only get through this sort of direct voter contact that we're providing. It's something that simply isn't provided in another way. You know, we can put out as many advertisements, we can put out all these other things, but there's a piece of that nuance that's captured in a conversation with direct voter contact that doesn't happen in that larger, broader voter education plan. So I do think that it's an important part of the plan that we put in there from the beginning, and I don't think that it's going to exist if we remove it from all the partners. I think it's a reality that when you partner with individuals and partner with people outside of government, that you're going to have some visuals and some optics that look like partisanship. But I don't think it's unique to this program, to this plan. I think it happens in other jurisdictions. It's happened for a great deal of time. It happens in this jurisdiction. It's happening right now because we are trusting you all as partners to go out into the communities. We're not checking any of your voter history or your other campaigning. We're not restricting you in campaigning for a specific candidate. And yet we're still trusting you to go out in the community. I think I love that GTAC is as involved as they are, but there's really no way for us to broaden our capacity without having some sort of trade-off. And that trade-off is going to be some amount of optics. So we can do whatever we can to create the guardrails. We can try to inform voters. I think, the hypothetical subgrantees that don't even exist yet, I think we could talk about how we can make sure to limit who gets that or to spread the reach so that we have a lot of different ones. But I think removing it entirely is something, one, that isn't realistic, and two, if we do it, it is simply a great loss to the overall voter education plan. So that's what I have to say on that. I think the other questions have sort of been answered in how they've been answered. And if there's technical questions, I'm happy to answer those.
Thank you very much, James. To close things out, I do just want to say, after thinking about this, one of the challenges of being a co-chair is to attempt to be both a neutral facilitator and a committee member with an opinion at the same time. And I am going to take off the neutral facilitator hat for a second to say I do not support this motion. I just want to say that I support the comments that were made by Jose, and what Zach just put into chat very well expresses my view on the matter. I feel very lucky to have the contractors that we do in terms of their expertise and their proven history of ability to reach out to voters within the Portland region. And I'm excited to be able to work with them. So there's my opinion, and I'll leave it at that. With that, I want to give people just a few seconds, let's say 30 seconds, to look through everything in the chat. Again, there has been a lot written there, and I want to make sure people have time to read through the answers that were given before voting. And then, since this is a motion that would require this to be an action that would go to the full GTAC committee, we do need to do a roll call vote. So what we'll do is I'll have Julia say the names off, and then people will vote yes or no to the motion. So I'm going to go back
Point of
up.
order.
Yes.
Yeah, Leah, can we have a restatement of the motion?
I was just going to say, I'm going
Okay,
up now. No. Thank you, Fred.
There
There is a lot in here. Wait, before I do that, Sophia, do you have something you'd like to share?
No, I just want to make sure. I think Fred had a question in the chat for city attorney.
Okay.
Yes, but you can answer that later. I mean, or she can.
Okay.
Is Lida there, Linda?
I'm here.
Okay.
The question that is in the chat was whether I can stipulate that the contract language regarding 501c4 will also apply to the LLC. I'm not exactly sure what you're asking, but essentially the contract will say that the work by United Way is supposed to be done in a certain fashion in compliance with the law, which one of the laws is what James had talked about. Don't venture into the political, politicking, the opposing and supporting candidacy type of stuff. So that is in the contract. If they fail to do that, we can go after them, But again, I think what I'm hearing from you all is that there is a sense of perception of something that is in the future, which I'm not the crystal ball guru. So I think that we have to kind of wait a little bit. I would certainly want to get the best suggestions. And I think it's up to the city folks to look at your suggestions and see if there's any improvements to the contract by amendment or clearer administrative direction to the contractor. Okay.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And with that, we need to move on to a vote at this time. I'm going to reread the motion one last time and then have Julia call names. So Terry's motion: the Voter Education Subcommittee recommends GTAC draft a letter to the transition team, mayor, and council recommending amendment to the voter education plan to eliminate the, quote, direct voter contact, unquote, in the get out the vote portion of the plan, and instead redirect those resources to the educational efforts that are earlier and or more broadcast in nature. Julia, with that, I'm ready for your help with a roll call.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to do alphabetical first name. So, Amy. I'm sorry, Amy, I didn't hear you.
Oh, yes, in favor.
Gotcha. Bill.
No.
David is absent. Destiny.
No.
Fred.
Yes.
Jane.
You say me?
Yeah, sorry.
Oh,
Jane.
sorry, I thought I heard James. No.
Jose.
No.
Juanita.
Yes.
Leah.
No.
Terry.
Yes.
Zach.
No.
I can screen share if it's helpful, but it's 6 no's to 4 yeses and 1 absent. So it would be a no vote.
Great. Thank you very much, Julia. I want to thank everyone for this conversation today. Thank you to Terry for bringing up the motion. Thank you to everyone for sharing their points of view on this. I think even though not all of us agreed, I am proud of the conversation we were able to have here, and do hope that people are able to continue to get answers to the questions that will be coming up. Again, staff, thank you so much for being here and for providing the information that you already have. And thank you in advance for hopefully being willing to answer more questions as we continue to have a conversation. With that, Sophia, I do apologize. I think it's probably obvious at this point, but we are not going to have time to get to the educational materials review, and hopefully we'll be able to soon. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Bill to take us over the next steps, if that's okay. Are you ready, Bill?
I can be ready. So good. Thank you, Leah, and thank you for this good conversation. We're performing our function of ongoing engagement, oversight. So thank you. Now, with regard to next steps, this meeting has been recorded and it'll be posted on the committee's website. And please keep in mind, tomorrow, January 10, is our full GTAC meeting, 6 to 8 p.m. Pacific. So that will be a good meeting. And the next subcommittee for districts and council operations, the next meeting for that subcommittee is January 19. And our next meeting will be determined based on the poll that we're, please fill that out. Julia sent an email on that. But that will be during the week of February 12th. Next slide, please. And this just summarizes our meeting schedule. With respect to tomorrow's GTAC meeting, the bulk of the meeting will be city budget, and there will not be subcommittee reports. So when we give an update, it'll be at the next GTAC meeting that will be in February. But we will next meet, well, the next GTAC meeting is February 6th. Our subcommittee meeting will be after that, but we'll have an opportunity to provide input at the February 6th meeting and later. And please look for all scheduled meetings on the transition website. Next slide, please. And I think now we're moving to you, Julia, because you get to, I guess, well, maybe even literally sound the gavel.
I wasn't going to, but I'm happy to.
It could be Leah's last act as
I know. I was gonna
let's pass it on to Leah.
Yeah, that I'm like off mute. I would just say thank you, Leah, for your one co-chairing, and I would encourage folks to think about if you want to serve. I really appreciate it. I know Bill would appreciate it. We're happy just to chat with you if you're not sure if you want to do it or not. But let me know. Thanks, Leah. Do you want to?
Wait, Julia, may I say, if you haven't co-chaired, you more than likely should get to work closely with Julia, with June, and with your fellow co-chair. So it helps us to get to know each other better. So thank you.
And with that, I'll say the words. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you all so much, and see you tomorrow.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.